Hi, it's me, Mr. Gessler. I'm pretty excited that you've gotten this far in your music lessons. It means that you're almost ready to play a musical instrument. So far, we've mostly learned about rhythm, patterns of long and short notes, the ta and ta-dee, but by the end of this video, you'll be able to name all of these notes and know how high or low they sound. What you learn today will be useful whether you're playing the piano, the ukulele, the xylophone, the guitar, or even boomwhackers. Take a look at this bird. How high is he flying? We don't know. We can only tell how high he is if we can see some other objects around him. I have a feeling he's way up there. Oh, but wait, there's the ground. Oh, maybe he's not as high as I thought. Okay, yeah, now I understand a little better. I can tell how high he's flying when I see what's above him and what's below him. In fact, I can find out exactly how high he's flying if I use some sort of ruler. Now take a look at this note. Is it a high note or a low note? We don't know. Just like with the bird, we can only tell how high or low a note is when we see things above it and below it. Recently, we started singing solfege in class. The solfege you know best is sol, la, and mi. Solfege is great for singing, but we use a different system when we play instruments. We name each note after a letter of the alphabet. This one is the letter A. How can I tell? Well, it's higher than these two lines, and it's lower than these three lines. You can almost think of this like a ruler. The higher the note, the higher the sound. The lower the note, the lower the sound. Now we'll just move up the ruler, only we're counting with letters instead of numbers. Also, unlike a ruler, we can stop on lines and we can stop in between lines. This note is on the space between these two lines. But the next note has a line going right through the middle of it. So what do you suspect comes after A? Yeah, it's not a trick question. The note on this line is B. And then we move up to the next space, which is, C. Let's keep marking our ruler. Next would be the line, and after C in the alphabet comes D, and then we go to the next space, which is going to be E, and finally to our last line, which is F. The next letter in the alphabet is G, and it sits right on top of that line. I'm going to put this fancy scroll thing here, but don't worry about that yet. Now, obviously we're out of lines, but in reality, we can keep adding new lines. We're just going to make them shorter and only draw them when we need them. So what note would go on this line? If you said H, you know your alphabet, but you would be wrong. We don't use H in music. We start over. This note is A again. Why would we do that? Because this A and this A sound so similar that they're practically the same note. If you play them at the same time, you almost can't tell them apart. So here's our weird music alphabet. Now it's really important to notice that unlike normal reading, we start at the bottom of the staff and read upward. So if this letter G is below this letter A, what note do you think is below this letter A? Also a G. And just like with the A's, these G's sound very similar. If two notes have the same letter name, they sound almost identical. Now let's talk about this fancy scroll thingy. This is sometimes called a treble clef. Try to imagine that it looks like the letter G. That's actually what it's supposed to mean. Notice especially this circle. Notice the line going right through the middle of it. That line is G. And if that line is going through a note, that note is a G. That's no coincidence. This fancy scroll symbol is also called a G clef, and it tells us where G is. We all know our alphabet pretty well. In fact, you probably know it forward and backward. What letter comes before G in the alphabet? Yep, it's all just like the notes above. Before G is F. And before F is E. Let's just move this all over a little bit. And just like there's a space for G on top of the staff, there's also a space below the staff. This one is D, because it comes before E. Again, when we run out of lines, we can just add these short ones. They're called ledger lines. What's this bottom note? What comes before D in the alphabet? This is C, the lowest note that we're going to see today. So now we can put a note anywhere on this staff and we can figure out the letter. Here we go. What note is that? Quickly, it's a B. And that's an E. And this one, that's an F. You failed! I think I'm moving too fast. Am I moving too fast? Okay, let's break things down a little. Okay, here's a note. What do you know about this note? What does this G clef tell you? Anything on this line is a... Yep, a G. You can play a G on a boomwhacker. You can play it on a recorder. You can play it on a ukulele. You can play it on a marimba. How about this one? It's on the space just below the G line. Think about it. What comes before G in the alphabet? Good, that's an F. You can play an F on a boomwhacker. You can play it on a recorder. You can play it on a ukulele. You can play it on a marimba. How about this one? It's on the space above the G line. What comes after G in our music alphabet? Here's a hint. It's not an H. That's right. After G, we start over on A. You can play an A on a boomwhacker. You can play it on a recorder. You can play it on a ukulele. You can play it on a marimba. Okay, try this one. It's far away from our G line, so we're going to have to count up. Remember, we're not just counting lines, we're also counting the spaces in between them. So, start on G and count up to our note. G, A, B, C. Okay, that note is a C. And yes, you can play a C on the boomwhacker, you can play it on the recorder, you can play it on the ukulele, you can play it on the marimba. You get the point. Here's something else that might help. We can practice saying our music alphabet backwards. First, let's just start saying the alphabet from the letter C. C, D, E, F, G. And then we start over at A. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And one more A. That's the easy part. Now let's try it backwards, starting on G. Ready? G, F, E, D, C, B, A. That feels a little weird. Let's try it again. Ready? G, F, E, D, C, B, A. Okay, try it without looking. See if you can say the next letter in our backwards alphabet before it appears on the screen. Here's an idea if you're in the classroom. One person says the letter G, then the next person says the letter before it in the alphabet. Then the next person says the letter before that, and when you get to A, start over again at G. See how fast you can go through the backwards music alphabet 3 times. Unless you have 7 students in your class, then it'll be too easy and too boring. You can get your teacher to play too in that case. If you're in a classroom, pause the video now so we can play this game. Okay, here's another method you can use to recognize the letter names of notes on the staff. You may already know that if we look at only the notes in the 4 spaces, they spell a word. Well, they spell a word if we're reading from the bottom like we're supposed to. And that word, face, happens to rhyme with space. Super easy, super handy. How about the lines? Well, these are a little trickier. You may have heard a few acronyms for recognizing these, like every good burger deserves fries, or maybe every good boy does fine. That takes a little longer to work out, but it still helps. The more we practice it, the less we'll need these little tricks to remember, but we're going to expand it a little further to include these high and low ledger lines. I'm going to credit my colleague Dan for this idea, although I'm giving it my own touch. Now, if you're tracking with me, you might already notice a problem. If we're reading from the very bottom, this acronym says, cares every good boy does fine and. That's not memorable. It's not even grammatically correct. This acronym is actually going to start on the bottom line, which is E. Every good boy does fine and cares. This will make more sense when I teach you the next part. Hold up your right hand. Touch your pinky finger. Think of that finger as the bottom line of your staff. Each finger above it is a line on the staff. 5 fingers, 5 lines. Put your left hand above your right hand like a shelter. That's your top ledger line. And again at the bottom. That's your bottom ledger line. Here's a chant that will help you remember. Line 1, line 2, line 3, 4, and 5 with a ledger line above and a ledger line below. And just like there are spaces between the lines, there are spaces between the fingers. Space 1, space 2, space 3, space 4, with a space up above and a space down below. Notice when I indicate a ledger line, it hovers over my hand, but doesn't touch it. When I indicate the space above and below the note, this does touch the hand. So I'm going to say it again, but I'm going to touch each line while saying the words for our acronym. Every good boy does fine and cares. Notice that I started at the bottom long line, E, and I ended on the ledger line, C, below the staff. Every good boy does fine and cares. So here's what we have from the beginning so far. Line 1, line 2, line 3, 4, and 5 with a ledger line above and a ledger line below. Space 1, space 2, space 3, space 4 with a space up above and a space down below. Every good boy does fine and cares. Great. We're not done yet. We still have those spaces. It works great to remember that the space spells face, but that doesn't help us with the space above or the space below. So we want an acronym for this too. And just like with the lines, we're not starting on D below the staff, but on F. Dan taught us this acronym. Fat Albert can't eat glazed donuts. That's fine, but since most of you have never watched Fat Albert, try this one. Fish and chips every glorious day. If you're working from home, pick the one you like the best. If you're working in a classroom, ask your teacher which one you're going to do as a class. Here they are again. Fat Albert can't eat glazed donuts. Or fish and chips every glorious day. All right, let's try it together once. Everybody hold up your right hand in front of your face and start on your pinky finger. Ready and go. Line 1, line 2, line 3, 4, and 5 with a ledger line above and a ledger line below. Space 1, space 2, space 3, space 4 with a space up above and a space down below. Every good boy does fine and cares. Fish and chips every glorious day. The more you practice this rhyme with your hands, the easier it will be to name the notes on the staff. Now let's go to the slideshow in Google Classroom called Treble Clef Flashcards. Use the chant we just learned to find the answers.